Welcome to Things of Gold, a Snarky Puppy podcast by Storm Sound and Osiris Media. My name is Ryan Storm.
And I'm Megan Gliona. We are so excited because this is our inaugural episode of our new podcast. So exciting, Ryan. And we're going to be chronicling the evolution of live Snarky Puppy from 2015 to the present.
Our first season that we are kicking off right now is going to consist of 12 episodes, each highlighting a different live recording. The commentary is going to focus on how their sound has evolved with different band lineups, soloists, and song rotations.
Yeah, we're going to have episodes coming out bi-weekly on Thursdays, and we're going to announce the show that we're going to be talking about a week before the release date. And all of them are available to listen on nugs.net and also on livesnarky.com.
Follow us on social medias at Things of Gold Pod to stay updated on show announcements and any other cool things that are happening. To go with each full show as well, we have also selected a bonus track to help better paint the picture of the time period. These tracks are available on nugs.net as part of the Things of Gold bonus tracks compilation album and are also available for purchase as part of their full shows on Live Snarky.
It's been so fun to dive into this stuff, and we want to encourage listeners of every level, like people who are really into Snarky Puppy and people who are just starting to learn about them, to come along on this journey with us. I am relatively new to the group, so every time that I'm listening to a show for this next episode, it's the first time I'm listening to it. So I'm learning a lot, and I think it's going to be really fun if people are kind of learning with me.
And since I discovered Snarky Puppy a few years ago, I have done an incredibly deep and obsessive rabbit hole dive on them.
Shocker.
To the point where a lot of these shows and songs I've memorized note for note. Megan and I both come from a fishy jam band background, so we are very used to analyzing live shows and with lots of detail. We both I've got. We moved through stormy weather and always almost there, talking about Fish and Goose, and Megan is co-host on the illustrious HF Pod.
Ooh, illustrious. I like that. Yeah, the Helping Friendly podcast is a big fish podcast. So if you like fish, maybe you know about it. And if you don't, check it out.
Awesome. All right. So without further ado, we are going to dive into our very first episode. The show that we are going to be talking about today, one of the earliest recordings available for purchase. It is September 15th, 2015, from the Southland Ballroom in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the late show. There are the band played two sets that night. There's an early show and a late show. We are going to be talking about the late set.
Ryan, can you say the name of the town again? How do you say it? It sounds like a really
Raleigh?
Raleigh.
It's Raleigh? Okay. Well,
it's Raleigh. It's like a very Canada. Yeah, I like it. Okay, sorry. I just had to make fun of you a little bit there.
That's very much allowed. So the band hasn't played at the Southland Ballroom since this show, but they had done a night with an early and a late show the year before in fall of 2014. There is some YouTube footage available from that show. I highly recommend checking that one out. Very crazy lineup, that show. They've got two guitars, Sean Martin and Corey Henry on the same show, which is not something that happened very often. So it's a good one. The band at this time, also, we are 18 months since they released We Like It Here, which was their most recent effort without any special guests. Less than 6 months after they released Silva, which is their album with the Metropole Orkestre, filmed in Denmark, I believe, in 2014. But they released that at the beginning of 2015, and they would go on to win their second Grammy for that album. And they are just a few months away from releasing Family Dinner Volume 2, which is another guest-filled album that they recorded at the beginning of 2015. And they are just a few months away from recording Culcha Vulcha, which is their first true studio effort in a very long time. They had done a series of, the live in-studio records that had kind of become their thing. So we are right on the cusp of this kind of new era of the band as they go into Culcha Vulcha, go through, some more lineup changes and kind of tighten up the sound a little bit. So
they are so prolific. Like, yes. That's one thing that I've been learning. They write a lot of music and release a lot of music. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah. And between that, they're touring a ton. Like it's unfortunate that they didn't start recording shows until, this fall 2015 tour. But we get a really good look at, kind of the tail end of the really experimental period here. We'll hear band leader and bassist Michael League. He's going to talk about in some of his like little spiels in between songs over some of the shows we're going to look at in this fall of 2015, talking about how, they know they're about to go into the studio and record all this new material that's going to be a part of their live rotation going into 2016. And so they're kind of giving last hurrahs to a lot of these older songs and kind of taking them in different directions, which we're going to hear a lot of, especially as we dive into shows from the European leg in October and November. But we are not there yet. We are going to talk about September 15th, 2015. Before we dive into the songs themselves, just a quick little lineup overview for everybody who is curious. Of course, all of this information, the lineup, and a little bit of show note action courtesy of Michael are available on nugs.net. You can see them in the show notes. But our lineup tonight, we've got Jason JT Thomas on the drums, Nate Worth on percussion, Sean Martin on organ and other keyboards, Justin Stanton on Rhodes keyboards, trumpet, Jay Jennings, trumpet and flugelhorn, Mike Maher on the trumpet and flugelhorn, Chris Bullock on the tenor sax and flute, Bob Lanzetti on guitar, and of course, Michael League on bass.
Ryan, what's a flugelhorn? Talk to me about that.
It's like a more muted trumpet kind of thing, like a mellower sound. I'm not a horn expert,
but it's a horn.
Yes. It's a horn. It's a very trumpet-like horn. It's just like a softer sound. I think we hear that.
That's cool.
In a couple of tunes. Yes. Well, one thing that I really like about this lineup, we have Sean on the organ. Generally not something that we see a ton with Snarky Puppy, because Sean, especially in recent years, has been spending a lot of time on tour with Bobby Sparks, who has the organ in his rig. We are going to get to our first Bobby show much later in the series. But Sean being here, he mentions in this show, which we'll get to, that this is just a recently purchased Hammond B3 that Michael bought for touring with the band. So it's great to hear Sean on here. A lot of very aggressive playing in this show. Tempos are up. JT's kind of drumming sound is very much like a runaway freight train at times. And it's amazing.
Yeah, that really stood out to me. I think the percussion in general is what I liked most about the show. I'm going to talk about that more as we go on.
Yes.
But that's really what stood out to me, for sure.
Yes. Well, speaking of percussion, we kind of get a little bit of a percussion intro to our first song, which is Straw Man off of the album Bring Us the Bright. This song works so well as an opener for me. I'm sad it's kind of fallen out of rotation in the last few years, which makes sense. They've had so much new material, but I wish this song would come back a little bit. I think it's a really phenomenal way to open the show. Kind of eases in and then gets into this really, aggressive groove with, and then also a very expansive solo section, which Justin takes on Rhodes. It's his birthday in this show too.
They talk about that later, right?
Yes. We do get that later, but I love his solo on this Straw Man. Very, very jazzy, as he tends to do. And I'm really going to talk about this when we talk about the White Cap a little bit later, but he's got this slight bit of distortion going on the Rhodes throughout this show, and the tone is just so perfect to me. I love the way it sounds.
Percussion to start. I don't know if it's bongos or you
congas?
Said maybe it's congas, maybe some sort of thing that ends with "guz," but, it's really driving, and it's just really kind of, like, hooks you right away, and then the bass comes in, and the horns just come in sounding like trains. I mean, there's just a lot of energy behind it, and then it gets really quiet, and like you said, jazzy and soft during that solo. The chimes kind of come in, and the thing that popped out to me is just this band right away, it sounds really textural, like, the sound is super full and layered, and then you've got this, like, juicy funk breakdown at the end. So, so, so good, and I just think when they're kind of, like, trading on the outro,
Mhm.
and, like, when the guitar comes in and, like, solos over, it's just, like, so satisfying. It was really great.
Yeah, we get some trading between Lanzetti on guitar and the horns, which is cool. They each take a turn. Yeah, this song is amazing. I recommended Megan do before we dove into the show. If you are someone who is more new to Snarky Puppy, I would highly recommend listening to the studio cuts of every song before you dive into the live, because as with most bands, they sound different live. More
Yeah,
extended.
definitely.
So it's good to have the point of reference to know what's different about them.
Yeah, I just made, like, a little playlist on Apple of, like, all the songs in order, the studio versions, and that
Mhm.
worked really well, and so I listened to that and then listened to the live show, and yeah, this percussion in this song is just relentless. It always sounds, like, ahead of the beat in the best way. It's really authoritative, really strong. That's what stood out to me right away when I listened to the song. I really like the
Amazing.
song. Mhm.
Amazing. Next up, we're going to go right into, I think, your highlight of the show.
Yeah,
Uh, r-
definitely.
Probably mine as well, but this is where we're really seeing that more improvisational side of what they're doing at this time, and we get the big boy itself, Binky. Michael just taking his time on the intro here. I love when he really like milks that deep octave synthy bass tone
Yeah.
for what he's doing. Um, yeah, and the intro just it grooves so hard. We'll hear as we go on, like kind of different paces on the intro and in different other shows, but it's really good, and it sounds this one especially sounds great with the organ. There are going to be a lot of shows that we get to. I keep kind of spoiling the future, but there are going to be a lot of shows where the organ isn't as prevalent, especially on songs like this, and so it's really cool to hear it. Sean doing kind of one of his signature moves with the band, which is organ with one hand and Moog bass with the other hand, which really gives it like a deep, deep sound, and it's amazing.
It's so cool. Yeah, I love the beginning. It's like they kind of creep into it and it just has this like, I don't know, really like ominous feeling. And then there's this like tribal percussion, which is just really juxtaposed to the funky bass line. And you've got these jazzy horns. That's one thing that this band seems to do like really well. They're able to pull from like so many different types of music and make it work together, which I think is, it's the one reason why like we love Fish, right? And I
Right.
think that like when you see a band that can play with different influences in a way that's like and make it their own, it's pretty fantastic. And I was listening to the song and finding myself making that like stank face. You know that face you make when
Oh
something's
yeah,
just really funky and like really good.
it's gonna happen a
And
lot.
yeah, I was just like, yes. So this song is so good, and then it gets like really quiet, and the horn does that just absolutely beautiful solo. So
hmm
pretty.
Yeah, we've got Bullock ripping up the first solo on affected saxophone, which is a really cool sound, very vicious
Mm,
sounding. He does a lot of like he's really good when he puts on a lot of distortion and crazy effects, just making it like a big like kind of wall of texture.
yeah.
Because when you have that kind of distortion on, the notes become less articulate. So he can't, be as kind of jazzy, I guess, as he would be on a clean sound. So I really like, the way it goes here. And the first solo section of Binky is much shorter than the second one. And, Maz kind of really just opens up, as you said, he really opens up that middle section, um, the more mellow solo. And this is him on flugelhorn, I believe.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, I like that. It kinda starts to build after that, and the drumming sounds, like, almost electronic. I don't know, it just has a really, really strong beat to it, super
hmm
fast, and then it turns again, and it's really, really sultry. is the keyboard player, like, is he on the thing with the mouth? Like, how is he making that sound? It's just like, it's so, like, sexy. I don't know
Yeah,
what it
so
is, but it's really
he's
good.
so there's actually what's interesting is, Sean's big signature thing with Snarky Puppy is the talk box. And he doesn't use it at all in this show. Which is interesting. He does
Oh,
use it in
really?
our bonus track that we'll get to, but there is no talk box in this late Raleigh set, which is really interesting to me. But that kind of, you've got that like kind of gentle flute sounding patch, which is something that he's doing on a keyboard. You've got Justin also on some nice synths in this part, but I love this
Mm,
middle section where they just build and build and build, like through, with this euphoric theme.
yeah.
This part of
It's
Binky, and I love, like, there are some versions where they'll kind of play it and then get to the peak and then move on to the ending
mm.
groove. But this one, they really, like, they take their time, and it's amazing.
Yeah, I felt like it made me feel like that moment when you're, like, drifting off to sleep and you're not asleep, but you're not really awake yet, and your dreams kind of feel like real life. You're not sure what's real or not. It's this really kind of trancy, dreamy space, and I just felt like at that moment that this song is really epic. Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of like a movie. It has that kind of, like, soundtrack feeling where you could really kind of get lost in it, and that swell is really great. Builds back up to that peak and then just quickly comes right back down again, and
Hmm.
it's really fun, really satisfying.
Yeah, I love these Snarky Puppy songs that have, like, multiple solo sections built in, and so it's like it's that movie feel. It's like that. It's a big movement. You've got the
Yeah.
first solo, and then it changes moods completely, and then you've got the second solo, and then you changes again, and then you've got this outro groove. And I mean, even when they build up to this big peak and then it dies down, instead of going right into the outro groove, they like get into it a little bit longer. Like Michael and Justin do a little bit of trading on bass and Rhodes before they get into the outro. Outro just it
Oh,
just
it's
comes
so
in.
good.
It's it's
Yeah.
it's it's one of the funkiest grooves built into a Snarky Puppy song. I think this is another place where we see Sean doing that Moog bass and organ thing. He's got some, like the on the fill
Yeah.
that he does on the Moog, which is just so good. But I love this outro, and we've got
Ugh,
Sean
so good.
throwing in some Outcast, as he
Fuck yes.
tends to do.
That is just yes. Anytime you wanna sing some Outcast over anything, I'm on board for that. I mean, this ability of the band throughout this outro and a little before, they have an ability to balance, like, artificial sounds with, like, a really earthy or grounded sounds, and I think that comes from, like, that deep percussion, but then also being able to use instruments in a way that kind of complements that, but it works. It's really good, and I think that having that Sean, who is someone who is so kind of soulful,
Mhm.
just adds, like, a depth to the band that I think is you can't fake that. You either have it or
Right.
you don't, and,
Right.
like, he's got it, and having him, like, joke with the audience and say, "Oh, we're in the South, you just know, like, Catholic hymns and gospel songs, do y'all know rap?" And kind of playful, it just sounds so fun. I'm like, "I wanna be in that room, like, that sounds so fun."
Yeah.
It's
It,
awesome.
it's it's cool because the Binky outro, even when Sean isn't on the gig, they'll frequently go into songs like P Funk or something like
So
that.
good.
So we'll hear in some future episodes, maybe even the next episode.
Love
Um,
that.
but yeah, it's a great outro, and then it just kind of fades into these like bass sax hits as Justin gets a little spacey. But then they pretty cleanly transition into Whitecap, which is their next song off of Tell Your Friends. I love this song. This one really pushes that aggressive vibe that we've been feeling all show. They just like launch into this. And I mentioned before about that slightly distorted Rhodes.
Mhm.
This breakdown that Justin does in the middle here, just like the Rhodes tone. It's like my favorite thing I've ever heard. Like Justin is one of my favorite keyboard players because of just his incredible feel for every moment, no matter whether he's playing Rhodes or synth or anything like that. Like he knows exactly where to be in the space and what to play. You know, he's not stepping on anybody's toes. He's perfectly complimenting people when they're soloing, like whatever. But this breakdown that he does. So good.
It's so good. Now, do you think, like, is that something they're deciding beforehand, like what kind of, what keyboard or synth he's going to be on for these solos, or is that something that he's deciding in the moment?
So this is, obviously that we're not listening to every show from this tour, but this is the breakdowns happen in Whitecap every time. I think they kind of differ, like the feel kind of changes. Now I'm not sure. Unfortunately, the main drawback between these versus Analyzing Fish shows is we don't have video
Right.
for the majority of the shows we're going to be talking about on this. There is some video on YouTube of the encore from this show with the special guest that we will talk about later. But we can't really see if there's like Michael like nods to Justin and is like, okay, you take the breakdown here, or gives Sean the cue, like you take the organ,
Right.
kind of thingy that he does. So it could be spur of the moment. It could be more planned. The thing with Snarky Puppy is it could be either, maybe they're just feeling the vibe. Like sometimes I feel like these breakdowns are usually keyboard based. I'm going to guess it's just kind of based on the vibe.
Yeah.
It feels like Sean just kind of feels it in this second break when he kind of takes it on organ and does some nice little churchy vamping, if you will. Kind of atypical, but I really like the organ break as well. I obviously, as a keyboard player and a massive keyboard nerd, I'm a sucker for every single keyboard thing that they do, and there's a lot of them.
There's a lot of them. Yeah, this is definitely, I get why this is your jam for sure. No,
Yeah.
this song's really cool. It has almost like an indie rock sounding beginning. It's got these like cool synths, and then the horns kick in, and then it kind of changes, and it's really driving. And the song almost feels like one big build. And then there's this,
Yeah.
insane keyboard solo, and the horns come back in, and it just has this. What's really great about them is that when they have one of these solos, and then the whole band comes in, it just is like, it's just that tremendous, like big band sound that just it's really full and amazing. And yeah, I like how they're kind of teasing Sean Martin to like sing if he encouraged him enough. And there's a lot of fun stuff that they kind of talk to the audience. I like that banter. It's
Yeah, well, and Justin gets a birthday shot after this song too.
yeah,
You can hear them bantering about it. Michael makes a comment about how it's his first shot ever, I believe.
yeah,
Um,
probably.
maybe some hyperbole, but also we'd be remiss if we didn't give a mention to Jay Jennings' excellent trumpet solo towards the end of this song. I'm still one of the main things I'm still working on differentiating in Snarky Puppy shows is hearing the difference between the trumpet players when they're soloing on, with no effects on. Like I can always tell when it's
Yeah.
Moz if he's got the wah pedal or something, but him, Jay, and Justin, I still struggle with differentiating between the three of them on clean trumpet. So I'll get there.
That seems fair. That's why watching videos is so amazing. I mean, you
Right.
sent me a bunch, and I have to say, seeing this band and watching how they communicate on stage live is pretty special.
Yeah, it's really cool also because, for anyone who may be newer to them, um, when it's coming up to a solo in the song, pretty much like almost all the time, Michael will decide who's soloing like as they're coming up to it in the song. So everybody has to be ready because he could just be like, all right, like Moz, you're taking this one, or like, okay, Sean, and you have to be
Yeah,
ready.
that's amazing. You've really got to be on your toes. Yeah.
Yeah, which is crazy. I talked to the violinist Zach Brock a lot about this. He was on an episode of We Moved Through Stormy Weather last fall, which was great. And he kind of talked about kind of the thought process and approaching improvisation. So check that episode out to hear more from there. But next up, we've got our podcast namesake, Thing of Gold, another one of my favorite Snarky Puppy songs.
Yeah, I was like, phew, I like it because that would be awkward if I didn't.
That would be awkward. This is another, this synth hook melody, whatever you want to call it. That's another, Sean thing. He's got that very, very clean Moog sound for the most part. It's got a little dirt on it in this one, but on the studio track, it's just this pure, clean synthesizer sound. And I love this riff. We get a little bit of an extended intro. Again, that experimental vibe that they're feeling at this time, they've described We Like It Here as being an indication of like their most experimental period. And the shows from 2013 to 2015 really capture that kind of energy. So they're at the tail end of it here. And also, unfortunately, they tend to be more experimental when they're playing in Europe versus in the US.
Oh, really? Why do you think that is?
European crowds are more attentive.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
I guess I'm so used to like Fish fans. We're so attentive. So
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I get it.
Yeah. So, we'll hear some really, really experimental stuff as we go on. But, you get this extended intro, more great roads from Justin. But I really like Moz's solo on this Thing of Gold. I tend to really, really like, but I tend to gravitate towards the Things of Gold with saxophone, specifically Bob Reynolds on the saxophone. My favorite Thing of Gold ever is featured in this podcast series somewhere, and we will talk about it later. Okay, I don't know if anyone can tell by now, but I'm very excited about this podcast.
I love it. It's awesome. I'm excited about it too, Ryan.
Thank
Yeah, I mean, for me to like learn about a band like this, it's pretty fun. You don't often have like listening exercises when you're listening to new music. I do a lot of them for HF Pod, but they're all Fish based.
It's all Fish,
So this
right?
is yeah. It's kind of nice to be able to like force myself to listen to other music. Yeah, and I really like this song. It's so groovy. It has the beginning is just like you're strolling along. It's just kind of like a groovy feeling. And love the echoing between the guitar and the horns. Like the guitar plays the riff and the horns play it and the guitars play it. There's just this kind of like chill back and forth vibe. This song to me sound most like closely related to some jam band music.
Interesting.
It's
Okay.
just it just has like this kind of I don't know what it was, but I think the refrain, that riff that comes in is really, really good and really satisfying when it comes in. It kind of feels like you've been waiting for it.
Right.
So when it hits, it's kind of like, that's good. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
It's good. And
Yeah.
this solo is really cool because if you listen close, Moz has got some great interplay with Justin throughout his solo. He flips on the wah partway through. Get some cool stuff going. Moz is an expert at wah trumpet. Really, really, really cool. Kind of the way he like. I always envision the wah trumpet kind of like winding its way around the other instruments in the song. If that
I
makes
like
sense.
that.
Like
Yeah.
as kind of a
Yeah, it
visualization
does.
for it. And then Sean has a little outro thing that he does on this song. Usually just like a bit of extra Moog stuff. But this one, he takes a second to note that Michael just bought this organ, so he's gonna
Yeah.
play some organ after people in the crowd are like, "Don't stop playing."
I know, I love that. The people are like, "Keep going, keep
Yeah.
going." That's just so awesome when you have an audience like that's there for that.
Yeah. So, for not the first time and not the last time, Sean throws in some church in this outro. Really amazing organ playing. I love the way Sean attacks the organ, just in general. Something we don't get to see enough with them, but leads perfectly into the beginning of What About Me here. This is my favorite Snarky Puppy song. I think I love the
Wow,
different places.
really?
Yeah, I love the different places that they take the solo section. I think it's just the song is just so good, and then the vamp at the end, and kind of the shenanigans that they do during the drum solo sometimes, which will pop up in some later episodes. This one is pretty straightforward as far as these things go. This one is also a pretty good introduction to What About Me's, because you have the Bob Lanzetti guitar solo, which is Bob takes it on the studio track as well. Very distorted, very aggressive. He just like charges headlong into it. And JT, sets the pace for him. I love also how it's not just up to the soloist, how the solo section is going to play out. It's the
Mm.
groove that the drummer sets up initially. So it could be kind of, standard, or it could be slower, or it could be faster or jazzier, what have you. So there's so many different places that this song can go. Um, and
That's really cool.
yeah.
I didn't realize that. Yeah, I think that there's such an awesome rock and roll vibe to this song that
Mhm.
from the guitar and the drums. It
And
just
that riff. Oh,
yeah, and it's just a huge showcase for drumming. I mean, so much of this show, the drumming and percussion is what stands out, and this is just another example of that, and it's really fun. It's much different than some of the more jazzier stuff they have. This is kind of more like, I don't know, rock and roll feeling. It's
right.
cool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It totally has that feel. And I kill for that riff. Like, the main riff of the song. It's just, it's so incredible. And JT's What About Me drum solos, which we'll hear a bunch of throughout this series, are just like trashing. Like there's one show note where I read it once, where Michael's like, yeah, JT, like it's like a freight train's the outro solo, and I was like, yeah, that's a perfect descriptor for his drumming, and now I use it to describe his drumming almost in every situation.
Yeah. You're like, "Well, that's exactly what it's like." Yeah.
That's exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah.
All right, so that brings us to the end of the main Snarky Puppy set for this show. It's a relatively short one as
Yeah.
well. Good kind of dipping your toes in for the first episode, but we're not done talking about the music from this show, of course. We've got the encore with legendary guitarist Eric Gales coming up to do a medley of Little Wing, Superstition, and Star Spangled Banner. He kind of gives a spiel before
This was
they
sick.
start playing. Yeah, where
This
he's
is what
like,
first of all, just hearing him talk about playing with Nas and Lauryn Hill the night before at the Beacon in New York. I mean, Nas and Lauryn Hill, like that is awesome. I'm a
yeah,
huge hip hop fan and Nas is, legendary. So it's just this guy's amazing. And I love when he's like, talking about how amazing Snarky Puppy is and that they did a different set, but he's like, what I did felt really good. So I'm just gonna do it again,
yeah. Yeah, and this is a really, really great medley. I love Little Wing.
So
I
good.
love an extended Little Wing because obviously the Studio Hendrix version is like criminally short because it's an incredible song. But yeah,
I
this
didn't know
medley
this
is
song. I don't know if that's, like, sacrilegious to admit, but I did not know this song.
wow,
Yeah. I know. Yeah.
noob.
I don't know a lot of Jimi Hendrix. I'm just gonna admit it.
You
I
need
don't.
to change that. Hot takes in the
Yeah.
first episode from
I
Megan.
know. I'm gonna get kicked off this podcast before the second episode.
Luckily, this isn't a Jimi Hendrix podcast, so you're good.
Thank God.
But yeah, this is great. And then, Gales finishes up his thing, and then, Sean takes over once again. Full church hype moment at the end. Obviously, as a white Jewish boy, I have no idea what, I have no experience with church. But I love the vibe of this, and it's a lot of fun.
Oh my god, it's so good. I mean, it's so soulful, and, this Little Wing is, like, delicate, patient. I really love how quiet this huge band can get. I mean, there's a ton of people on stage, and they can get really, really quiet, and that's powerful.
Mhm.
And Superstition, I love this song. This is one of my favorite Stevie Wonder songs. It's so good, effortless, and it just builds into this rollicking, like, full band jam. It's awesome, super fun.
Mhm. It's great, and it's a hell of a way to end the show.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, yeah, super high energy.
Yes. And so that brings us to our bonus track for this week's episode. Now, when I pick these bonus tracks, obviously through my obsessive inhalation, we'll call it, of like every single show that I can get my hands on, I've listened to pretty much this whole tour. And so I think I have a good indication of what good bonus tracks would be. If there is a song from this U.S. leg, the September U.S. leg that you've heard that you think should be talked about more, let us know on social media. We'd love to hear, what your favorite picks are. If you were picking a bonus track here, but I went with the September 19th, 2015 Shofakon into Quartermaster. This I kind of discovered by accident because on Nugs it's tracked weird. So it
Mhm.
looks like there's a 23-minute Shofakon and a 6-minute Quartermaster, and the show notes looked super intriguing. And so I was like, okay, I'll spin this. Turns out it's like a normal length Shofakon that then goes into a really amazing Quartermaster. But the Shofakon is essential context for the beginning of the
Yeah.
Quartermaster, so you can't leave it out. And it's also it's a pretty good version of Shofakon.
So how many minutes in does the quartermaster start?
So
Because I wasn't
when they
sure.
from the crowd chant,
Yeah.
and then when they get into that like funk thing, that's the
Mhm.
beginning of the
That's
Quartermaster.
quartermaster. Okay, yeah.
Obviously, Quartermaster is a song that we're going to see take many, many forms, especially over the first 4 episodes of this series. I think they're all very, very different, and so I don't think any of them also start in the exactly typical way that the song usually does
Mhm.
from the studio version, which you heard. But this is also one of my favorite Snarky Puppy songs. It's probably the one where improvisation crops up the most consistently, which we're going to hear, especially in this one. So talking about the Shofakon first, love this song. Always a crowd pleaser. It's a hit. Great Justin solo. Amazing. Obviously the song is so good, and great drum and percussion breakdown, which I'm assuming you loved.
Yeah, no, I loved this. This I love both of these songs. I love the kind of soundtrack feeling to the intro of Shofakon. It's just really cool. It has like almost like Middle Eastern vibes, and the horns are so good. And then about 5 minutes in, it gets that kind of like frantic energy. It sounds like a big jam. It's really fun. And the audience is just going crazy. And there's like this call and response. And it just seemed really fun, like, just
Yeah.
seemed awesome, and then going into the quartermaster, like, I was dancing my ass off in the
Yes.
kitchen, just, like, super into it, and is it Sean that who's saying, like,
That's Sean.
"I
He
can make you
takes
dance?" Yeah.
yes. He takes the crowd, when the band walks off for the encore break, the crowd picks up the Shofakon hornline chant again, as they do. And when they come back on for the encore, Sean takes that and starts playing along with it on Moog, and then they just jump into this incredibly funky groove, at which point, he starts singing Atomic Dog by P-Funk over top of it. Little call and response. And then they very smoothly, obviously at Michael's call, they modulate into the proper key of quartermaster and bring in the horns. The horn intro, the whole part of this song, I'm such a sucker for. And when it's played at this gritty half speed, funky way, it's so good.
That's my favorite stuff that I've heard from them so far. I mean, it's no surprise. That's like what I like. Anybody that knows me knows I like funk and I like funky stuff. I like soul. This is like really, really good. And they do it really well. It's really authentic. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, Sean absolutely wrecks the solo section. Beyond that, we don't get any sort of crazy improv in the solo section or the back, like in terms of full band. But we finally get some talk box action here. He does some call and response with the crowd, which is amazing, and then just proceeds to just shred everywhere. Talk box, organ, like all of it, amazing. Like just a hell of a way to finish this show. A hell of a way to finish our listening for this episode. I describe it in my notes as destroying everything in his path.
Yeah, I mean, can you talk to me a little bit about how long he's been in the band? Has he been in from the beginning?
Not from the beginning. He joined the band at the time of the recording of Tell Your Friends, which was, I believe, 2009.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Ish. Yeah, so awesome. He's been, he's a pretty long time member. He's probably my favorite keyboardist, but it's really hard to decide because they also all, they're not like 4 keyboardists who play the exact same way. They all have different instruments. They all have such different styles. So he's my favorite keyboardist when I'm listening to this show, because this specific quartermaster, because he's right at the front. But also, I've been raving about Justin the whole time too. So you can't decide really.
I know.
So hard to
they're
play
all
favorites.
Incredible. Yeah, and you don't have to. You can just say we like them all.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So that is. That's our lineup for this episode, and we'll be back in 2 weeks with episode 2. At the time of the release of episode 2 will be the day that I see my first live Snarky Puppy show. And whoa, you may be thinking, you haven't seen them live? No, neither of us have seen them live yet. We are very excited. This is actually the second podcast I've started about a band before I've seen them live, but I've now seen Goose 17 times. At the time of this episode's release, I will have seen them 25 times. So don't worry. Doesn't mean we don't know what we're talking about.
Well, I actually don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm learning as I'm going, and I'm going to see them in April. Yeah, at the Beacon, and I'm so excited about it.
Yes, and I will be seeing them at Town Ballroom in Buffalo, and then again at the end of June, and when they play in Toronto. That's a leg up they have on a lot of jam bands. They like playing up here.
Yeah, and any Phish fans that got into Phish during the hiatus knows that you can be obsessed with a band before you see them live and still know what you're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm. It's true. So I'm very much looking forward to that. But episode 2, we will announce obviously a week in advance what show we're going to be talking about. It is just a couple weeks after this one, but the band has traveled around like 2/3 of the world in the process in between these shows. Very different lineup. Very different sound. We are very, very excited. Let us know what you thought of this episode on social media. Let us know what you thought of the show. What shows are your favorites from this time period, your favorite songs, moments. anything, we'd love to hear from you at Things of Gold Pod. Give us a follow. That about does it for this episode. Thank you, Megan. This is great. We've got 11 more of these planned out right now, but I'm very excited.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. This is so fun. It's just a joy to learn about a new band, and to do it with you is awesome. So thank you, and thanks everybody for listening.
Oh yeah. See you next time on Things of Gold.